letters have been around for a long time, but specifically in Israel, we've actually found some of the oldest letters ever. And it might actually prove some things in the Bible. Let's check it out. Today we're going to be talking about the ancient Jewish city of Lachish and the 21 letters that were found there. Now, when I say letters, I don't mean pen and paper. In fact, it probably looked more like this than anything else. They would write down messages on scraps of pottery or broken plates, and then be able to write short messages that were sent back and forth. Now, most of these messages are actually pretty unreadable. They're pretty minor. They have a few letters on them, but not really much else. But a few of these letters are actually really impactful and could have some really significant meaning when it comes to biblical understanding. These are called the Lish Letters, and they're actually called ARTZA. This is a very ancient form of sending back and forth letters, and these are some of the most ancient that we've ever seen. These actually date back to 600 BC, before the Second Temple period, before Jesus, before all this stuff that we're used to studying in Israel. This actually is right before, weeks or months before, the Babylonian conquest, where they come and they destroy the first temple. And while there are 21 ARTZA, we're actually going to only focus on 2, and these are numbered by the city and then a Roman numeral after them. So we're going to look at Lachish 4 and Lachish 3. Let's start with number 4. The first thing that I find really interesting about this letter and many of the others is actually the use of the name Yahweh. I am, God's name that he gave to Israel during the time of Moses. This is insane. It's so cool to see this ancient language and how they all revolved around Yahweh. It's really, really incredible. But this letter goes on to talk about some more mundane things, talking about what's going on in the world. But the end of this letter is really, really interesting. And he will know that the fire or smoke signals of Lachish we are watching in accordance to all the things which my Lord has given, for we cannot see Azekah. So if we look back over on the map, we can see that Azekah is a city closer to Jerusalem during the time of the First Temple period. This is an ancient city that was pretty powerful and one of the strongholds of the Israelite people during the time. However, during this time is the time of the Babylonian conquest, and we know that the Babylonians attacked from the north. They attacked into Azekah and then into Lachish and into Jerusalem, burning the entire city. This was an insane time period, and we have a letter from that exact moment. What is he saying about Azekah here? He's saying that they can no longer see the signal fire from the city of Azekah, meaning that they have been conquered and they have been destroyed. And that also means that Lachish is next. You can imagine the terror and the sadness that they would have had at this moment, knowing that they would have to fight this immense force of the Babylonians, something that they maybe couldn't have ever taken on. And as we see from history in the Bible, of course, they couldn't. A lot of them were put into exile or into slavery. Very few people got away. And the worst part about all of this is that they were warned. God warned them that this would come, particularly through Jeremiah. Jeremiah 26:4 says this, "Thus says the Lord, if you will not listen to me to walk in my law that I have set before you, and to listen to the words of my servants, the prophets, whom I send you urgently, though you have not listened, then I will make this house like Shiloh, and I will make this city a curse for all nations of the earth." This is a clear warning from God through Jeremiah that God needs them to listen to him. He needs them to obey the law and to do what he's asked them to do, but they don't. And they continue to do what they want to do anyway. Classic humanity. But Jeremiah in this chapter even is threatened with death because of these words that he's saying. Even though they're God's, even though he's a prophet, these people did not like it whatsoever. But it was very shortly after this that the city is destroyed. And this brings us to Lachish 3, which is actually really a funny letter. And we'll get to that right after this sponsor. Oh, wait. We don't have a sponsor. It's just us. If you want to support more stuff like this, we could really use your help over on patreon.com/thesnipelife. If you want to see more things that bring the kingdom alive to you, that's the best place to help support us and what we do here on the YouTube channel. Anyway, let's get back to the video. This letter is being sent by a commander of a nearby garrison named Hoshayahu, and he's sending it to who we believe to be a governor of the city named Yahush. Apparently, the previous letter that was sent was from Yahush, governor of the city, and he sends a letter out to Hoshayahu saying that he doesn't know how to read, that he's actually illiterate. And this hurts Hosheyahu's heart so bad that he decides to write a letter to him today in order to rectify this. I beg you, the ear of your servant about the letter which you sent to your servant yesterday evening. For your servant has been sick at heart since you sent the letter to your servant, and because my lord said you do not know how to read a letter. As Yahweh lives, nobody ever tried to read me a letter, or for that matter, every letter which comes to me. If I read it, then I can recount it down to its smallest detail. Now, this is funny to us, but it does show us the legitimacy of some of these military leaders actually being able to read during this time. This is a pretty rare thing, especially in the ancient world. I think personally it shows us the importance that it brings to the Jewish people on why they would want to have literacy, especially being called the people of the book. But after Hosheyahu clears all that up, he begins to give his report for the day of what's actually going on. Now, it has been reported to your servant, saying the commander of the army, Konyahu, son of Elnatan, has come down to go to Egypt. Now, at first reading, this seems like another inconsequential, maybe not super important line. However, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 26 and see if we can find any correlation here. Starting in verse 22, we see that King Jehoiakim actually sends certain men to Egypt, and just so happens that one of them is named Elnatan. Now, in the letter, we're seeing as Elnatan's son is going down to Egypt. It would make sense to me that if Elnatan is in Egypt, his son would want to go there at some point as well. At this point in the battle, Israel is actually trying to side with Egypt against the Babylonians, although that doesn't really ever happen. So there is a possibility that this is a biblical connection to the biblical Elnatan, but that's not where the biblical connections stop. In the last few lines of this letter, we see that Hosheyahu begins to talk about a letter that is being sent from a prophet. And the only thing that he tells us about this letter is that it says, beware, sounding very much like Jeremiah's warning earlier on in chapter 26. Now, there are other prophets as well during the time of Jeremiah, such as Uriah, which is spoken about later on in chapter 26 of Jeremiah as well. Uriah actually has to flee down to Egypt because of the words that God is having him speak. The kings are trying to kill him as well, just like Jeremiah. So a lot of these prophets had to flee before the battle even began when the Babylonians were taking over, which is why a lot of them didn't actually die. So there's definitely a possible connection here between these Lachish letters and the time of Jeremiah. We know that these existed during the same time, and these biblical accounts seem to corroborate a lot of what we're seeing in these Lachish letters. Just so cool. I love these discoveries. My favorite thing in the world is when we get to see something, learn about it, and study it in order to make the kingdom real to us. I think so many times we lose sight of who God is and what we're supposed to be doing in the world because, well, we just let things get in the way. What do I need to do today? What work do I need to get done? Instead of, what does God want me doing right now? How can I build his kingdom? If you really like this video and you want to support this channel, the best thing that you could possibly do is to watch another video. YouTube thinks you'll like this one right here, so go ahead and check it out.